Good afternoon. Welcome to the Department of Family and Support Services Emergency Financial Assistance for Survivors of Gender-Based Violence and Human Trafficking RFP webinar. Just a few housekeeping rules. Due to the volume of participants, everyone has been placed on mute. Please submit questions via the questions box, and we will respond to questions at the midpoint and end of the presentation. For technical issues, please make use of the question box to notify us. Please be advised that this webinar is being recorded. Anything stated at this webinar is not intended to change the solicitation document. Any changes will be in writing and in the form of an addendum issued by the Department of Family and Support Services. The purpose of this webinar is to provide information for the solicitation. A copy of the recording will be posted on a DFSS YouTube channel with the link to the recording on the DFSS webpage at cityofchicago.gov under the alerts and/or funding opportunity tabs. Please give this up to 5 business days to upload. DFSS retains the right to share a list of registrants to this webinar along with their contact and organizational information at our discretion. As for the agenda, we're going to start with the welcome and introductions, and I will give GBV the floor to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Adriana Camarda. I'm the supervisor over the Division on Gender-Based Violence. I will pass it on to Deirdre.
Hi, everyone. Deirdre Harrington, project manager at DFSS over the Emergency Financial Assistance Program.
Thanks, team. And as for the remainder of the agenda, we will go through the purpose of the RFP, the background, information about the scope and program descriptions, the selection criteria, timeline, the technical assistance for applicants in e-procurement, and one last round for questions. And with that being said, I'll hand it back over to gender-based violence to discuss the purpose of the RFP.
Thank you, Jillian. So the purpose of the RFP is to increase survivor autonomy and choice when trying to flee or deal with their experiences on gender-based violence. This program tries to do that with a one-time financial benefit. We are seeking applicants that can manage the program from end-to-end survivor experience from the application, well, actually from the outreach and education and awareness, marketing, and to the application phase and to the payment phase, partnering with organizations or subcontracting with organizations to do community-based outreach and awareness about the program and how to apply and where they can apply and how to engage at the end point with other GBV service providers, and how to having to possess the staff and the technical platform to actually hold up and have a live format where this application can be submitted, reviewed, and approved or denied for eligibility to issue finally payments to survivors. Next slide. Just a little bit of background on why DFSS believes in the cash assistance program for GBV survivors is that research shows that obtaining financial independence is one of the key steps in for survivors to feel empowered and independent and how to address the violence that they're experiencing in an autonomous way with the funding. In the previous program, we have been able, through the delegate agency, to provide over 9,000 survivors payments, one-time $1,000 payments into the community since December of 2024. The goal of this RFP is to really incorporate this program as to one of our permanent program models as opposed to a pilot, even though the ARPA funds that sustain this program were really what launched this program. We are putting this into our permanent portfolio as a way, and a crisis, if you will, service to survivors of gender-based violence. Next slide. Like I said, the goals of the program are to provide financial relief in a one-time payment to mitigate the hardships that survivors face. They can use it for any purpose that they want. And we get to a little bit on what the key or one of the majority of the resources that they use with this money. It's to improve their well-being and their autonomy. They can use it for health-related or living expenses or anything they choose. And obviously, another one of the objectives is to evaluate and understand what survivors are spending their money on, what they're prioritizing, and where we can fill in the gap services if they're spending things on basic needs or rent. Here is the current state of the program as is. The program incorporates a survivor survey form or feedback on how they spent the money. You will see that the first 5 items, the majority of the items are basic needs like rent, food, utilities, transportation, and basic hygiene products. That is primarily what they spent the cost on. And as you can see further down there, these are all types of resources or sources that they needed just to address the violence in their lives, and they did not spend it on just anything. They spent it on just surviving. Next slide. In this RFP, or I should step back, in the previous RFP, the program was launched with ARPA funds, and therefore the target population or the target community areas were areas that were hit hardest by COVID and vulnerabilities. In this RFP, we have shifted away from the COVID vulnerable community areas and taken a look at our Chicago Police Department dashboard data on where are the communities that are hardest hit with domestic violence related homicides and sexual assaults. Here you'll see both for the time period of 2023 to 2024, the top 16 community areas with domestic violence homicides and the community areas with the largest amounts of criminal sexual assaults. We are targeting some of these communities. The program really can serve anyone across the city, but clearly these are our target community areas that we want included in the outreach strategies and activities and marketing. Program requirements. Here you'll see one of the 5 things that we really want this program to function on. We want the design and the execution of the application portal to support survivors through the process, using partnerships and coordination with subcontractors to really get the word out about the program. We want the administrator in this RFP to design and manage that platform so that it's easy for survivors to use and access. Manage and oversee the participant enrollment and compliance with the program, making sure that the eligibility criteria are met. Manage the payment disbursement to survivors in a way that survivors can accept and use, and to not get, mismanaged by the person causing harm or things like that. Oversee the timely and accurate data collection system, meaning provide DFSS reports on the demographics of this applicants and the persons being paid. And finally, communicate regularly with DFSS to troubleshoot any challenges with the portal or with the program or with the outreach. Next slide. Here you'll see some of the performance goals and outcomes that DFSS would like to see. For 2026, we have committed $1 million of corporate money to this program. Typically, we have seen that the program requires about a 15% administrative rate. And so with the $1 million, we are bare floors trying to establish that 850 survivors receive their $1,000 payment this year or next year. We'll be collecting the percent and the number of applications successfully submitted to ensure that the applications do not reach high numbers and can be processed quickly so that survivors can get paid within a reasonable amount of time. 90% of the program or the percentage of the approved clients I'm sorry, 90% of the people that enroll will be successful into getting their application approved. 95% of the participants will successfully enroll and receive their one-time payment. Obviously, we're not asking for this to be a lottery system. We're asking it to be contained when they open up the application, and that these are percentages against those numbers that are controlled. 80% of the participants will report satisfaction with the program. 70% of the survivors are from community areas that we just mentioned that are targeted in the Chicago Violence Reduction Dashboard. 15% of the recipients will be survivors who have engaged in some type of GBV other than domestic violence, meaning we also want a representation of the other types and forms of gender-based violence. And then finally, that 15% and the 2% of you see here on demographics were established by DFSS as benchmarks to measure whether the outreach and the education about the program in vulnerable communities was actually working. So the 15% of other GBV, 40% of recipients that identify as Black and African American, and 40% of the recipients that identify as Latino or Hispanic is an indication that you are targeting those most vulnerable communities of color and poverty and violence. All right. At this time in the presentation, we will go over the selection criteria on how your application will be reviewed. Your application is divided into 5 selection criteria areas that, if you've ever applied for DFSS funding, should not be a mystery to you. The first one being community involvement. This selection criteria is you'll see in the application provides you with the number of points that is allocated to community involvement out of 100. There are 3 bullet points here. You will be rated or scored on those points for how you respond to questions on these 3 bullet points. The respondent demonstrates a clear understanding of the target population and can include their strengths and weaknesses, as well as their strengths and assets. The respondent has an expertise in working with the target population, has relevant cultural and ethnic competency, and can serve groups that demonstrate client engagement activities in these communities, and essentially that your staff is reflective of where you are going out and doing the engagement and activities. And the respondent demonstrates a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion at their leadership and staff overview so that they reflect their community where it's serving. So these are your 3 sort of components of what we'll be scoring you on community involvement. The next selection criteria is organizational capacity. We will be asking you 4 or 5 questions based on these bullets here for the points that are allocated. We'll be looking to make sure that you have qualified staff that either oversee the program or are working in the program, and they have the adequate certifications to deal with this population, or at least the training. The respondent has adequate systems and processes to support either monitoring the program fiscally or programmatically. The respondent has relevant systems to collect data, to store it confidentially, to password protect it, and to make sure that survivor confidentiality is kept at all costs. And finally, the respondent has the ability to track the payments, program participants, provide quality customer service, demonstrate that the systems for people who don't have access to maybe an online portal or have access to a portal or are already connected to services can connect with this program and can report out to DFSS data. The next selection criteria, where is the most allocated points, is your strength of program. We will be asking you questions based on these 4 bullets. The first one is whether you have experience implementing and managing a large and complex program with this, where you have to not only maintain a technological platform, you have to provide customer service and review applications and then distribute payments. The respondent proposes systems and tools to support a seamless and effective customer service when making these payments. And then the respondent proposes a plan including trusted community partners to really engage survivors to make sure that most community areas where we have targeted are applying for the application. And finally, the respondent proposes a design and implementation plan to review the documentation for eligibility. And I forgot about the part about minimizing participant burden on the application. Therefore, meaning it's easy for the survivor to go through the process without overburdening them with documentation or going back and forth with lack of communication. The fourth selection criteria is performance and management. Here we're looking on for evidence of strong past performance on a program like this or similar to this. Whether you have experience using data to inform its services, meaning the surveying of clients and looking at that analytically to identify what gaps in services may exist. And finally, demonstrate their experience in disaggregating data and identify a situation or an example where your agency has used disaggregating data to measure whether one population has better outcomes than another and why. And finally, the last selection criteria on the next slide is your budget and budget justification. There are two areas where we'll be scoring you in this selection criteria. One is whether you have the fiscal capacity to work on not only the reimbursement process under this contract. This contract also has an advanced payment option that you can elect at the beginning of the application to receive an advanced payment to be able to make payments to the survivor through a risk assessment process, a process done by the Department of Finance. And then secondly, the respondent demonstrates a reasonable implementation cost and operating cost and staffing to run the program, and that it aligns with what you said in the application. And finally, all of these selection criteria or all of these questions that we ask you, yes, you are responding to questions on them, but we also are asking you to make sure that you attach the necessary documents. So if you're in a section where it's talking about community partners or sub-partners, we will be looking for either formal memorandums of understanding or linkage agreements or a list of informal agreements, including how that partner or how that linked partner is, what the role is that they play in the program and how they help you effectively serve survivors. The second thing is we're looking wherever we're talking about staffing or cultural competency of your staff or things like that, we're looking at your resumes, your job descriptions, and your certifications that you have submitted. And then finally, although this is an attachment, not attaching your budget is a reason for not scoring your application. So you need to, of all the attachments, the budget is one of the most important ones that you need to attach. And in it, you have to be clear about what your budget request is to DFSS and what is anything that's match or outside of the budget request. The budget form looks very closely to if you've worked with a city, like a city budget for DFSS. So the line items are the same and it's pretty clear. You just are missing all of the, maybe some of the, all of the details in the personnel, but you can list all of the people in that budget. And here's a clue, all of the people that you list in personnel should be talked about in the application. And you should be providing a resume or a job description for all of those titles. That's an overview of the evaluation process. Here is just some side things to know about the evaluation process. You're evaluated on the basis of the strength of your proposal and the responsiveness to the selection criteria. What that means is you are rated based on a point system on how you respond to all the parts of a question. Not just one part of the question, but all of the parts of the question if it's a multi-part question. So I can't stress enough to be responsive to every question and to be responsive in a way that if somebody picked it up who does not know or understand what GBV is, could determine what score you receive. So there's no guarantee that the person who is reading your application is a team member here. It could be a team member from another division that doesn't know about GBV. So your response needs to be complete. Failure to submit a completed proposal or responding to certain questions will either make your submission subject to rejection or you'll lose points by not addressing every question in the application. Also, the commissioner, upon review of recommendations from the division, has the autonomy or the authority to reject, deny, or recommend any agencies that have applied based on past performance or area of need, meaning geographic. And finally, DFSS reserves the right to ensure that all mandated services are citywide and provided in a linguistically and culturally appropriate manner. Next slide. Here is the timeline for this RFP. We at DGBV have 3 RFPs rolling out at the same time. They will all be due at the same time. They're all due on Thursday at noon on July 31st of this month. And then the program will begin January 1st. Next slide. As I said, the program will begin January 1st and go through all the way through December 31st of 2028. So this is a 3-year contract, not written here. This is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options to renew on behalf of DFSS. So it could potentially be a 5-year contract. We want to launch on January 1st. We will not make any awards until the budget is passed typically. DFSS cannot really award anybody until there is an approved city budget. So we will not be notifying anyone on the RFP that begins January 1 without knowing what the status of our budget is. The money allocated right now for this program is $1 million per year of the program. So that means $1 million in 2026, $1 million in 2027, $1 million in 2028. If there are additional dollars, we will award them clearly, but it all depends on the budget. And we have done in the past added additional dollars to this program to serve additional persons depending on budgets. The administrative cap for this program is 15%. That includes administrative and indirect. So if your indirect costs don't cover all of your administrative costs, you're just capped total at 15%. When you submit your mandatory budget for this RFP proposal, we would like you to submit a 1-year budget for a 12-month period from like January 1 of 26 to December 31st of 26. You do not have to submit 3 years worth of budgets. As you know, in the contracting phase, you will have to resubmit a budget for processing anyway. Please pay attention to the cost category definitions attached in the budget. There are instructions there. Be careful and thoughtful and inclusive when you're developing your budget, and apply for your actual costs that you are going to incur. We cannot actually give you more money than what you ask for. So, I mean, if you, in the bill above, I said be thoughtful about your application. If you feel that your application requires more than what the funding amount is, then you should apply for what you think you need. You will be rated on that and whether it's reasonable or not, but you should apply for what you need. If there is a competition of more than one contract, which may not be the case here, and there's additional funding, it could be that we have the ability to fund you for a larger contract if there's funding available. If there's not, we're backed into a corner to giving you only what you ask for in the RFP, if that makes sense. And then finally, use the reasonable cost questions on the application to determine how you reflected to this budget. Like I said, this narrative on this question should align with the rest of your application and should align with the budget. Next slide. Having come from out of multiple CDGA and multiple RFP processes, I'm going to give you the best advice I can give on how to score well on one of our applications by giving you some of the most common things that we see that where you can, your program can pick up points. One of the things on your budget is to check your calculations and your fridges. Don't forget supplies, client assistance if it's applicable, and put your budget in the appropriate column. This should probably be at the top. What you want DFSS what you are asking DFSS for should be in the DFSS grant column. And then anything that you put in is match, which is not required. And then there's a total. So make sure your DFSS grant column is the budget amount that you want. And then you can disregard show your match. You can show it, but it adds to value to whether your program has reflectively looked at all your total costs, but a match is not required in this program. Next slide. Now we're getting at what are really the common things that I see. One of the most common things that the team has seen, or I've seen in my experience, is applicants not answering all of the parts of the question completely. And so if you don't do that, you can't score you on all of the points that are allocated to that question, right? Also, and Jillian's going to get to this in the end, but there is a character limit to some of the questions, be aware of that. If you go over the character limit and submit an attachment for the rest of your narrative, we are not allowed to look at that. So make sure that your response fits in that character limit for each question, but make sure that you answer the question completely. Failure to submit a budget, job descriptions, or resumes is going to have an impact on your score. Budget is definitely going to have an impact because we're not going to be able to review it. That was the determination made by OBM this year. If you omit the job descriptions or resumes for everybody that is on the budget, you'll definitely get impacted on in your scoring on all of those questions. Like I said, beware of the character limits. No attachments are allowed for the extra questions, and some of the questions have different character limits, but Jillian is going to get into that. And then the best advice I can give is to respond to each question like your reader doesn't know about gender-based violence or this program or your program. So that if there is a reader who is not from the team, they are not measuring you against your 3-sentence answer to what, barriers survivors face or what your community faces. And if it's repetitive, unfortunately, this is the process, and that you should really make sure that you answer the question completely. Okay. That's all the advice I got. I'm going to turn it over back to Jillian.
Thank you, Adriana. Again, applications for this RFP are due July 31st at 12 noon. Just a couple application tips. We cannot stress enough that you need to start your application. You should start your application as early as you can and save it often. If you have never done business with the City of Chicago, please register into iSupplier as soon as possible. Please review RFP narratives and application questions closely. Remember, they align with the scope and selection criteria. Please use the information in the RFP for guidance in formulating your answers. There is a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces for each. This is for each response. Please do not use the back button on your browser. You can potentially lose your work. Again, we stress that you start your application as soon as you can so that that'll leave time to work out any errors, any technical issues, and just for peace of mind. Tips for working in e-procurement. To submit multiple applications for a single RFP, applicants would need to set up a unique user account in iSupplier. The e-procurement system is not capable of submitting more than one distinct proposal per associated email address. Therefore, please use a separate email address for each submission. You can submit your application and later amend it up until the due date of July 31st at 12 noon. Avoid the rush and mishaps by submitting early, and plan on your submission taking approximately 30 to 60 minutes. Please be advised that late applications cannot be accepted. Make use of the e-procurement hotline for help at 312-744-4357. Please note that this hotline operates during business hours only, which is Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Again, start your application as early as you can and submit early. Just a couple agency requirements. We require agencies to submit articles of incorporation and any amended articles of incorporation. We also require an IRS affirmation letter. This letter is for not-for-profit agencies, and it must be dated within 60 days of submission. You can obtain this letter by calling the IRS directly at 1-877-829-5500. However, if you are a for-profit agency, please submit your original letter from the IRS showing your FEIN number. Your UEI number is required, as well as the central contractor registration. You can obtain a copy of this registration on the entity overview page on the sam.gov website. And lastly, certificate of good standing letter with the state of Illinois is required. As of April 2024, we have a new labor peace agreement ordinance, which will apply to all DFSS and CDPH delegates that have 20 or more employees working for their organization. The only exemption are hospitals. Contractor must provide written notice to the commissioner or her designee within 72 hours of becoming aware that employees want to organize or that a union seeks to represent employees. You may ask, what is an LPA? A labor peace agreement is an agreement between an employer and a labor union that ensures that an organizing drive is not impacted by union busting techniques, including employee retaliation. And in return, they will not strike or stop work in a way that will impact human services. For technical assistance, there will be a link to this RFP on the DFSS web page, and in addition to training documents. Please see the alert section on our website. For questions on registration and e-procurement, please contact the iSupplier help desk at customersupport@cityofchicago.org. They also can be contacted at the help desk. The number is 312-744-4357. We also have training materials online, which includes both documents and videos. And these training materials can be found on the cityofchicago.org website under iSupplier and online training materials. At this time, we are going to delve into how to enter your response and accepting the amendments. Step one for submitting your response and accepting the amendment. Step one, you create a quote from the drop-down menu in the actions box, and then you click on go. Once you click go, this will take you to the application page where you can get started. If the RFP you are interested in has been amended, and in this case it will be, you will need to acknowledge and accept that amendment to start or submit your response. To accept the amendment, click on View Amendment History up at the top of the page, circled here. To begin the acceptance and acknowledgement process of the amendment, follow these steps after clicking View Amendment History. First, you click on the document number. Next, click on the infinity or eyeglass icon to review the amended changes to the RFP. Next, click on the Acknowledge Amendments button to acknowledge receipt and understanding of the changes to proceed. And by acknowledging the amendment, you are indicating that you are aware of the changes made to the RFP in the amendment. When you get to the screen that looks like this, you click on the I accept checkbox, and then you click Acknowledge. Next, you click on Yes to indicate that you confirm acknowledgement of the amendment. Finally, you click on the checkbox that you accept the terms and conditions, and then click on Accept to accept the terms and conditions. And that is the final step in acknowledging and accepting the amendment. Once the amendment has been accepted and acknowledged, you can then move forward with submitting your application. So step one on submitting your application, when you are ready to submit your application, which means that each requirement box has been completed to the best of your ability, and you've attached all required documents, you start by saving your draft one last time and then clicking continue. If you are missing information, you will be given an error message at the top of the page. So in this example listed here, the error message basically says that something is incomplete. One of your lines is incomplete. Usually the error message directs to something left undone in the application. In the last example, the error message indicated that the lines found under the Lines tab had not been completed. In the example listed here, the error is about an unanswered question in the application or the requirements section. The quote value refers to your case missing answer. So as you can see, where it's circled, the quote value is blank, which means that either you didn't put your answer here or it somehow disappeared. But either way, the system will let you know when something is missing, which I think is extremely helpful for applicants. Step 5, once your application is free from errors, you are ready to proceed and submit. And at this point, clicking continue should put your application into the review and submit phase. Once you see a screen that looks like this is something like a summary page. And it's also your last chance to review all of your data to confirm that it's accurate. Please double check your attachments and your responses. And then once you've seen that everything is there, you can scroll down to the bottom of the screen to see your responses, as well as to acknowledge and check the signature box. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll be asked to provide your electronic signature. Please be sure to fill in that signature before checking the box. Once that box has been selected, you can then submit your application. Once you submit your application, you will see a submission screen similar to what's on the page here. The e-procurement system will also send a confirmation email within 24 hours of your submission. However, if you don't receive that confirmation email and you just want to just know for sure that we received your application, please feel free to email me. My name is Jillian Black. My email is jillian.black@cityofchicago.org, and I can get back to you and send you your quote number just to give you peace of mind. At this time, we're gonna pause for questions. I do see we have about 3 questions in the chat box.
We do, and they're related and they're sort of in chronological order. Thank you very
Okay.
much for doing that. If we decide to apply for a lower amount than the cap, does that change the required metrics serving 850 survivors? Yes, if you decide to apply for less than $1 million, the metrics would go down. It would be a 15% cap. So, and the next question, if you apply for, let's say, $500,000, which is lower, we're expecting that your 15% cap will be based on the $500,000, which is $75,000 towards admin costs, and the rest, which is $425,000, would go to serve 425 survivors. Easy peasy divided by 1,000. The third question is, with the $1 million per year reward, the required client served number is 850. Client assistance can be cash and supply, but limited at around $1,000 per client. Yes, as the RFP states, the program is in DFSS's intent is to keep the payment at $1,000. If anything changes, that would be a change in contract or discussion with the awarded delegate if we change the award amount and the contracting amount. Getting back to the question is, if we have additional funding, let's say, we end up having additional funding we can dedicate to this program, any additional funding is also subject to the 15% cap. So let's say you get $1 million and we give you another $1 million, you'll be able to have $150,000 on again to work to apply to personnel or administrative costs.
Thank you. I believe this.
I see another question.
I do see one more. How flexible is the financial assistance?
So DFSS has put no restraints on the payment, on what the survivor can use the financial assistance for. they automatically get $1,000, no more, no less, and only take a survey or respond to surveys on what they spent the money on. There is no tracking. There is nothing that we'll do at the back end to monitor what they're using their $1,000 payment on. We will ask them for, for quality improvement and program improvement, but we will not be tracking or denying their whatever they're buying. Like I said, more than a generous portion, we use it on basic assistance, such as rent, utilities, transportation, and basic hygiene products.
And there's one more question down at the bottom.
Do you want to see the funds spread across the whole year? Could we potentially plan to distribute all of the funds in 2 months or 4 months or 6 months? I think that the funding could be spent either way. There could be one limited rounds and only do it every once every 6 months, or it could be every 2 months or every month. So there is no, DFSS is not looking to spend it all at once or do it over time. It's up to the proposal. When we award additional funds, then we would probably more than likely be looking at more opportunities for, survivors to apply, but that's an if.
Thank you, Adriana. Again, if we have additional questions that you can't think of it. Oh, you see any? Okay. You see some more. Okay.
Is there a current provider of the service who has developed a CRM system? There is a current delegate who is funded for this and has been funded to do this program with ARPA assistance for, I believe, 3 years. That is the network to advocating against domestic violence. They're the current delegate. Do the clients have to provide proof of domestic violence towards them, ex-police report or court order? No, there's a self-attestation that we would like for you or the program to use so that no documentation has to be provided for GBV.
Thank you. That seems to be the end of the questions at this time, but you do still have time to ask questions up until Monday, July 7th at 5 p.m. And those questions can be sent to Adriana. Her information is listed on the screen. Those are for program questions, but for technical questions, those questions can be directed to the e-procurement hotline. Their number is 312-744-4357. They can also be reached at customer support at cityofchicago.org. And you can also copy me or reach out to me, and I can assist in the best way I can for technical assistance. My information is listed on the screen as well. However, I strongly suggest that you reach out to customer support, as they're the best people to contact for technical questions. And Adriana's information is also in the RFP. I'm sorry.
There are 2 more questions.
Yeah, there's some more questions. Where did I leave off? Do you want the application or the application process to be available publicly, or could we essentially just take in applications through referrals from service providers? We are seeking a public open platform. There can be a mechanism where agencies or service providers can assist the survivor to apply, but the application portal itself is open to the public. And will DFSS distribute the surveys to survivors, or is this the center responsible for that? The delegate is responsible for distributing the surveys. We don't know or have any direct contact information for those that are assisted. So we would ask that the delegate manage the surveying and the collection of the survey data.
All right, thank you. Again, additional questions, if you don't have them now, they still can be sent up until 5 p.m. Monday, July 7th. Before we close out, does the team have anything to add?
No, I just want to thank you. I thank everybody for attending. We really support this program, and we hope to get your application. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck on your responses, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.